Yeah, done with my Oreo.
Okay, good.
Do we really know what happened?
The brother did.
The brother, that's what I thought too.
I mean, that seems like kind of obvious.
Hey, do you want to talk about death?
Yeah. I mean,
Murdery thingy.
We shouldn't talk about battery technology.
I mean, I would love to talk about battery technology because it's fascinating and it's actually one of the key topics in, like, technology these days. It's like the limiter for a lot of things. If we had better batteries, then we could have way cooler stuff in general. Anyway, we're not going to talk about that. Welcome to Mystery Murdery Thingy.
Yes. Welcome.
If you want to hear about
Murdery
battery technology, listen to, like, This Week in Tech, or I don't know that many technology podcasts, but I'm sure there's a shit ton out there, like everything.
Yes.
Oh, I was going to tell... Oh, I'm Mario, by the way.
Oh, who are you?
Mein Name ist Mario.
That wasn't a language.
That was German.
Oh.
Or you can say, Ich bin Mario.
My name is Chloe. Yo me llamo Chloe.
Good. I was trying to think of the Spanish way, of saying it in Spanish, but I couldn't immediately, and so I thought of German. I took one semester of German in high school, so. But no, I was going to tell you, I heard this really cute story about these, like, middle schoolers who started a podcasting club in their middle school.
What?
And this is up in Gary, Indiana. And,
nothing happens over there.
And,
they
well,
need that club.
What was happening is they're going to put in, like, a waste disposal recycling center next to the school, which, of course, they didn't really want, because it's going to, like, who knows what's going to be coming out of there. It's all this bus traffic or truck traffic, right, bring stuff in. So the kids were, like, doing a story about this, like, for their podcasting club. And they were, like, asking the adult guy who was, like, running the place, like, these questions. And the guy was just like, why are you always recording me? Like, why are you asking me all these questions? Can't we just, like, talk or something like that? But the kids were, like, especially one of them was like, is it going to emit fumes? Like, he kept asking him that question, like, point blank, and the guy would not answer, and he never answered him. So it was pretty interesting.
Well, we need to listen to it.
I know, right? But that's, like, the power of, like, you know, that kind of podcasting. Like, journalism podcasting, which is not what we do. I just listened to S-Town. That was really good.
Yes,
I know it's, like, super old. That's not, like, a new thing.
I've been trying to get Mario to listen to S-Town for, like, months.
So long.
He, like, stopped listening to podcasts for a while.
I listen to podcasts, I listen to, like, particular ones that are, like, mostly politics. I listen to, like, 90% politics
Which
podcasts.
is boring.
Which I find interesting.
Okay. We're rambling.
But I did finally listen to S now. Yeah, this is more rambling than we usually do. Although it's only like 3 minutes. So, not too bad, I guess. Anyway, you're going to go first this week. Are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
Let's go.
I've been ready, bitch. All
yeah,
right.
we've been ready since yesterday. I got tired last night, so we didn't do it.
Things happen.
Sometimes you need to go to sleep at 7 o'clock.
Yeah, what the fuck? Okay, we're not talking about that.
Sorry.
That's a different conversation that we have yet to have yet.
That's why this is coming out a little bit later. Anyway.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks for...
So,
yeah.
I have a locked room mystery, and I know the only other locked room mystery we did was about Letitia Thoreau, #episode 1, right? I think?
Yes.
Episode 1, yeah. That one was wild. And just quick reference to, don't remember, this woman who was already a French spy, right?
She may have been.
She may have been a French spy. Was stuck in the neck with a knife on an empty subway. Weird.
Right. Very weird.
But this one isn't more like... It's a locked room mystery, but you can get around it.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Okay,
sure.
we'll get to it.
Yeah.
So, it happened in 2011. January 26th, 2011 was a very snowy winter day. There was a huge blizzard forecasted, and that was going to spread all throughout the northeast. So this is Philadelphia we're talking about. Ellen Greenberg, an elementary school teacher, recently engaged to her fiance, Sam Goldberg. They're there living happily in Philadelphia, and she's an elementary school teacher. She teaches at Juniata Park Academy. It could be Juniata.
That's what I was thinking, yeah.
Park Academy, where at this point, students are dismissed early because of the blizzard. So she goes home, she fills her gas tank, and goes home to the apartment that her and her fiance shared. So Sam comes back, and they were together in the apartment until around about 4:45 when Sam left to use the gym. He comes back a half hour later, and he's fine that he's locked out. He can't get in. They have a swing bar mechanism, and that mechanism was engaged from the inside. Like, we have a swing bar mechanism, correct?
Right.
I mean, no, we don't. What, huh?
Oh my god.
So he started panic. He bangs on the door, starts sending frantic texts to Ellen. He never gets any reply, nothing. He even like goes down to the security guard and says like, "Hey, I can't get into my place. It's been a while. Can you just use the master key to open the door for me?" But he was like, "No, it's against policy." So they wouldn't let him do that. He ended up breaking in to see a very, very brutal sight.
Oh, God.
On the kitchen floor was Ellen. She was sitting up, slumped against the cabinets. There was a serrated knife plunged 4 inches into her chest. There was a strainer filled with blueberries and like fresh orange, sliced for the summer, that was resting on the counter, and 2 clean knives were also in the sink. She had 20 stab wounds, with 10 alone to the back of the neck. It's covered all over her body. Absolutely crazy sight. So 911 was called. Goldberg was instructed to begin CPR until he mentioned the knife in her chest, and he was ordered to stop. Ellen was pronounced dead at the scene at 6:40 p.m.
Oh my god.
So, investigation.
Yeah.
At first, police looked at this and did say suicide.
I knew you were going to say that. Because
Yeah?
they always fucking say that.
Yeah, so because of the locked door, okay?
Right.
So there were no signs of an intruder or signs of Ellen trying to flee and like run away. Her left hand was holding like a clean towel, and there were no defense wounds. And Ellen's DNA was the only thing that was found on the knife, nothing else. And security cameras, they had security cameras in like the lobby in the front, but they didn't have security cameras on the hallways that led up to the apartments.
Okay.
So
someone could have gotten in without
yes.
being seen.
Goldberg sat with detectives and he was fully cooperative. I know everybody looks as like it was the boyfriend.
Right.
But
That's the next logical step.
I mean, we don't know. We
were just watching Manhunter or Mindhunter, right? And one of the detectives even said, even back then in the 70s, I guess they knew those. Like 90% of the time,
it's the husband.
It's the husband or the boyfriend or someone you know super well. Like usually the husband or the boyfriend.
But he was very cooperative with police.
Uh-huh.
He sat with detective, answered questions, seemed clear. He had an alibi that was proved. He was at the gym. They searched her computer and they didn't find anything suspicious or indicative of suicide, and there wasn't a note either. The next day, Assistant Philadelphia Medical Examiner Marlon Osborne begins Ellen's autopsy at the city morgue. So, just another rundown. On her chest were 8 wounds. One of them being the knife in the center, which was a 4-inch wound. She had stab wounds to her stomach and a gash across her scalp. There were 10 wounds in total, from nicks to about 2 to 3 inches deep on the back of her neck as well. There were 11 bruises, quote, in various stages of resolution, end quote, on her right arm, abdomen, and right leg. And Osborne looked at it, and he ruled the manner of death a homicide. So at this point, the DA and the police are not, or the ME's office and the police are not, have very different views.
Yeah.
On January 29th, 2011, a police spokesperson said that despite the homicide ruling, authorities were still going to go ahead and pursue the suicide angle. So at this point, they do step one, and they start to look into Ellen's mental health. Her parents reported that her behavior did change about a month or so before her death. She was usually really outgoing and bright and bubbly, but she turned into anxious and unsettled, and she would make up excuses and things and say oh, I'm just stressed about my job. She stopped being open and talking with people, and she even talked about moving back in with her parents. Just because she wanted to. So friends were like, okay, you should go see a psychiatrist. They urged her to see a psychiatrist. And so she did, and she started seeing Ellen Berman of Marion. So Ellen Greenberg had 3 appointments with Ellen Berman, the doctor. So Berman told the investigators that Ellen she did feel overwhelmed at work, but there weren't any suicidal thoughts. She never spoke of any physical abuse, verbal abuse from Sam, and she even notes that Ellen was smiling when she was talking about him. But she did describe Ellen as having severe anxiety and prescribed her the anti-anxiety drug Klonopin and Ambien, a sleep aid. So just a note that both of those drugs list suicidal thoughts and behavior as possible side effects. And they were the only drugs found in Ellen's system when she died. Police investigators, they looked at this evidence, and they explained that the multiple stab wounds were like test wounds or hesitation wounds. Yeah.
I don't know how legitimate that is or not.
Yeah, I don't know
Honestly,
either.
I don't know. Yeah.
However, there was still, a big dispute between the medical examiner's office and the police. So the police decided to seek out an outside neuropathologist to examine the spinal cord to see if it was damaged. So a damaged spinal cord would have left Ellen incapacitated. According to Detective John McNamee, the neuropathologist's conclusion was that the spinal sheath was hit, but the cord itself was not severed. On March 7th, a few months later, 2011, the ME's office changed the cause of Ellen's death to suicide. Ellen's parents, Joshua and Sandra Greenberg, they were extremely shocked, devastated. But they were also upset because no one told them, and they found out through media reports.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So after a few months, lots of discussion, lots of emotional discussions and stuff like that, they decided to do their own investigation. And they purchased Ellen's autopsy report and photos of her body from both the autopsy and at the scene, and the ME's investigation report from the scene. So they gave that evidence to Pittsburgh forensic psychologist Cyril H. Wecht, and he had a disadvantage, though, of not having the detective files to review. After going through everything, he said, quote, "I don't understand how they wrote this off as a suicide," end quote. Next, the Greenbergs retained a private attorney, and he had a reputation for taking on the police. It was definitely something that he would usually do. Civil rights lawyer Larry Krasner. So in May of 2012, Larry got everybody together. He had a meeting on behalf of the Greenbergs with police officials and reps from the DA's office, and they had this discussion to try to get that investigation reopened, but there was no luck. So through former state attorney general Walter Cohen, the Greenbergs' lawyer at this point, and they got lucky in There was one forensic psychologist and Walter Cohen who worked for them for free. He like represented them for free, and so he filed a public records request in order to get the police file. And, they started bugging him. They were turned down once, but after some convincing, the police allowed them to view it, but they weren't allowed to make copies or take photographs. So Tom Brennan, he's a retired 25-year state police veteran, and he's a former chief of Dauphin County Detectives. He joined the team and was working Ellen's case for free. He noted that the lack of defense wounds doesn't necessarily mean suicide, and he described it as something called a blitz attack. Certain images of Ellen at the scene also caught his attention, specifically an image that showed a stream of dry blood running horizontally across her cheek from the side of her nose toward her left ear. So, like, she was laying down, right? And blood dripped. Mm-hmm. But she was found slumped up she was found vertically upright when she,
right.
Right. So either she moved herself or someone moved her.
So what they're saying essentially there is that the body was moved post-mortem and therefore suicide doesn't make sense. There must have been another person involved.
Yes.
Okay.
That's the conclusion I
just wanted to make sure I kind of understood that.
Yeah. Then there's the question of the 10 stab wounds on the back of her neck and a possible spinal cord injury. So, Guy DeAndrea, a former prosecutor, and now he has his own private practice, he started working on the case, and he couldn't find a neurology report. The ME's office said it couldn't be found or it just didn't exist. And there was only one part of the autopsy that read anything about the spinal cord. It read, quote, note, neuropathologist Dr. Lucy Rook examined the spinal cord and concluded that there is no defect of the spinal cord, end quote. Fortunately, Brennan discovered that there was actually a piece of Ellen's spinal cord still kept in storage at the medical examiner's office. So he got together, contracted with Wayne K. Ross, a forensic pathologist, who looked at the evidence and ended up concluding that one of the stab wounds penetrated Ellen's cranial cavity and, quote, severed the cranial nerves and brain. As a result, she would experience severe pain and impaired loss of consciousness, end quote. So now there's this question of the locked door, right? Which police said was the main fact that they focused on when determining if Ellen was alone when she died. But both Brennan and DeAndrea noted that you can find that shit on the internet. Like, there are several videos of several methods of manipulating swing bar locks from the outside. So, the chief deputy coroner for Montgomery County, Gregory McDonald, he weighed in as well. So, he was saying that the shallow wounds, quote, tend not to occur in homicides. They will stab you, not hesitate significantly, end quote. And that, quote, it wouldn't have been impossible for her to inflict them upon herself. It's unlikely, it's unusual, but it's not impossible, end quote. Did I read that right?
Yeah.
It wouldn't have been impossible for her to inflict them. Okay.
Yeah, you read that correctly. The
fact that 4 of Ellen's wounds were several inches deep, also she had a gash on top of her head, could be indicative of homicide, McDonald said. Quote, that is not the typical pattern of someone who commits suicide through a sharp instrument like that, end quote. But despite this investigation and despite the conclusions they came to, the family has never had any luck with reopening the case. And my main resource that I looked at a long-form article by the Inquirer, they did their own investigations as well, and this was like the only resource where they like did the story by real life interviews and like looking at files and stuff like that. So they pressed for information, right? So an AG spokesperson named Joe Grace provided a search history from Ellen's computer. It was what she searched between December 18th, 2010 and January 10th, 2011. And that was recovered by Law Enforcement's Regional Computer Forensics Laboratory, RCFL. And that was turned over to the police on April 1st. It included the search terms suicide methods, quick suicide, and painless suicide. They also provide some text messages between Ellen and her mother. The day before Ellen's death, Sandra texted her, quote, "You need to see a professional," end quote. Ellen replied, quote, "Okay, I'm trying, just scared a bit for everything," end quote. But the Emmy's analysis back in 2011 said that there wasn't anything on Ellen's computer that was indicative of suicide. But because, so this is what they said. They said, or Grace's office said that because they didn't find any analysis in the DA's file, quote, "We cannot say if anyone, police or prosecutor, ever looked at it," end quote. So this RCFL file, they can't guarantee that anybody ever really looked at it. And they obtained it the year before, 2010, I think. No.
That was when it was from 2010 till 2011.
Yes. So the same office refused to release the rest of the files to the Greenbergs as well. So, to this day, it's the clear cause of death for Ellen is unknown. We'll not know. There's still lots of questions, does the locked door matter? Why so many stab wounds? Why was it relatively clean for a crime scene?
Right.
What do the text messages mean? Do the drugs mean anything? What about the searches in her computer?
It's an incredibly complex case.
Yes.
It really is.
I have a quote from her father. Quote, "The fact that Ellen's computer Googled painless suicide and she stabbed to death, and I have experts that say it's suspicious of homicide. What am I supposed to say?" End quote.
Right.
Sums it up pretty well, I'd say.
Yeah, and, it's, sometimes cases get reopened years and years after, so maybe the next, district attorney will find this a good case to make their, record on or something and say, like, the last one didn't do it, but, I'm going to take this on and I think they did it wrong, and even 10 years from now, maybe.
What do you think happened?
It seems like it was a homicide.
That's what I was thinking.
It's not, just like they said, okay, I'll admit, okay, it's not impossible that it could be a suicide. That's not impossible, it seems. Maybe it is, but we can't definitively say it's impossible. But I think you also can't say it's impossible for it to be a homicide just because there was a locked door. Like you're saying, there's ways around that. So, yeah. But it's certainly very intriguing. But it doesn't, I can see how it doesn't look like a homicide in a lot of ways. Other than, of course, the trauma to the body of the victim, Ellen Greenberg. I mean, that's a pretty big indicator that it was a homicide. Right, but I can see how other factors are pointing away from it.
What got me was the fruit in the sink.
Right, is someone, gonna commit suicide by stabbing themselves a bunch of times in the middle of making a snack?
Yeah.
That seems very strange and not indicative of a suicide. You're right. I don't know. But maybe someday we'll find more out. Like you said, it was, 2011, so it hasn't been that long, so... Maybe. Okay.
What you got?
I am, this week, going to do another sort of a history mystery, right? And if you guys remember, way back when we did the Nazca Lines, I'm pretty sure I did it. Yeah. It was episode 23. So this is sort of a bit of a similar story. So this is out in the desert of Peru, right? Near the Andes, and near where the Nazca Lines were, and out in the desert there are between 5,000 and 6,000 of these man-made holes in this site that's become known as the Band of Holes. And it's pretty interesting.
Wait, what?
So I'll kind of describe what it actually is. Okay, so when you are kind of looking at it like from above, like aerial photography, it kind of looks like like if you have a dirt bike or like like one of those four-wheelers, and you see the tracks in kind of the desert sand from those, it kind of looks like that. But when you get up close to it, you see that it's not actually holes in the ground either, because it's like really, really hard, dense bedrock there. It's actually dirt and smaller rocks that were taken from somewhere else, brought here and made these kind of like bowls, essentially, that look like holes. They're about 3 feet wide and about 2 to 3 feet deep. And there are almost 6,000 of them. And in a row that's kind of like about 50 to 60 feet wide, that runs over about a mile and a half of the desert, kind of up this mountain called Monte Sierpe, the Serpent Mountain. So does that kind of make sense, like what it is? Because I feel like that's kind of weird if you're not like looking at a picture. If you have a computer near you, I would suggest looking up a picture of what this thing is, Band of Holes, because it's kind of hard to describe. But does that kind of make sense?
Is it?
So each one of them is kind of like a built up kind of like hole, but it's you can think of it as kind of like a bowl of
So it's in the
dirt.
ground. It's not like a bowl of dirt sitting on top of the ground.
No, it is sitting on top of the ground. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because
That's what I was confused about.
And it's confusing when you look at it too. It looks like they
so
dug
it's a
in.
perspective thing.
And in
Okay.
fact, you can probably find a bunch of YouTube videos where people will tell you that it was dug into the ground of the solid bedrock, and that it must have been aliens because of that. We're not going to talk about the alien theory of
Aliens.
very
That's
much
what it
in
is.
this.
That's
but
what it is. It's
there-
the aliens.
there are people who are very much convinced that this
Aliens!
thing has to do with ancient aliens, and they may or may not work for the History Channel. Okay, so.
Ooh.
Right.
Ice.
Ooh, a little dig there at the History Channel. Okay, so like I said, they're not actually dug into the ground because it is that volcanic bedrock. But yeah, there's like a bunch of. Oh, and the other thing when you actually look at it, I think especially if you're on the ground, kind of looking at it, it's kind of eerie. Like it's kind of weird because it's just like out in the desert, But and when you look from above too, because it kind of looks like snake pits to me a little bit. You know what I mean? Like out in the desert, there's like snakes, and they make these little pits, and they come up and bite you.
How old are they?
They're from about the mid 15th to mid 16th century, we think, but it's hard to tell exactly because it's just like soil and rock and everything, so there's not that much to date. But the best guess that people have is that they're from like the mid 1400s essentially. And they also kind of look like pimples a little bit when you look at them from above in a way. And this has lent them the nickname of Cerro Viruela, Smallpox Hill. So it kind of looks like smallpox.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, it's kind of weird, kind of creepy. So anyway, from the ground though, it's like a kind of hard to see them actually, kind of like the Nazca Lines and other like geoglyphs essentially.
Right.
It's kind of, which is part of the mystery of it. Like, well, why did they do this? The Band of Holes is definitely best viewed from above, and the site came to wider fame, although it was like always known to the local people there in Peru, when aerial photographs were taken by this guy named Robert Shippey on a National Geographic trip in the early 1930s. And though it wasn't, the existence of these weren't really a mystery, the purpose of the Band of Holes, that's the real like nugget of the mystery here.
Yeah.
And it is very mysterious, even to those local people in the Pisco Valley who, like I said, have always known about this site. And I was about to say fairly unique. Of course, that doesn't make any sense, but I believe in terms of my research that this is also a unique site, or there may be one or two others that are like it. So it's kind of weird in that way too. And it's thought, like I said, that it dates from the Inca Empire, the late Inca Empire, mid-15th to mid-16th centuries, although there are ongoing studies that are trying to pin that down a little bit more. But it's not, although it's from the Inca Empire for sure, or from that time,
Yeah.
it wasn't necessarily made by the Inca Empire.
Okay.
Right. No one really knows. That's like part of the mystery too. There was another civilization like in that particular area called the Chincha, and it's actually very near the Chincha Valley. And those people occupied that general territory sort of up until this time too, the mid 15th century. So they could have made it, and at that point the Inca like took them over or whatever. Just before, of course, the Spanish swooped in with all of their, bullshittery.
We can talk about that.
Sure. So it could have been them or it could have been someone else. Like I said, it's kind of hard to know. But modern researchers do think that it was probably the Inca, and there's some reasons for that. One is that they've found some Inca pottery in the area that seems to be from the same time. Also, the Band of Holes is located like right near this ancient Inca highway. Apparently, the Inca had like a bunch of highways. It was a very built-up civilization. And there's also a large storeroom, Inca storeroom, called a kolka. And this was essentially like a big enclosed room where they had this grid pattern on the ground, like 9 inches by 9 inches squares. And they think that this whole like deal of making these storerooms with the grid was that, so the way the Inca Empire worked, they didn't have money at all. Like, they didn't use money.
Oh, okay.
They had a barter and trading system, but a lot of it was also through tributes and taxes. Like I said, they would take over peoples like the Cholcha, and then they would demand tribute. So the farmers would take their stuff to a place, and then the government would take it from there to wherever, right? It's how it's always fucking worked ever since we've had civilization, right? It's always people trying to get other people to give them stuff to give to other people. Whatever. So anyway, how do they measure that, right? Without money. It's with these kolkas with the grid. You fill up whatever, 10 square grid with stuff, and then we know it's that much. And then what's interesting, they also didn't have a written language system either, but they did have this thing called quipu, which are actually very precise knots that are tied in different colors of string, and that's what's used to store and convey information. Essentially, that's their writing system, and there were libraries of these quipu, all of which were burned by the Spanish.
What?
Yeah, dicks. Like I said, terrible. Awful stuff that they did to these people. It's like, they tried to wipe out their civilization, like literally wipe it off the face of the fucking earth. It's sad.
I wonder if this was a border.
If what was a border?
The holes.
Oh, I don't know. I don't think so, because it would be very inconvenient to make a border that way, but maybe it signifies some kind of border. I mean, if there's kind of this question of, right, was it more utilitarian, or was it more, like the Nazca Lines, more of a geoglyph, or something spiritual, or, I'm not sure the word I'm trying to think of, but, if it were something like that, yeah, maybe it's like some kind of, like, highway to the heavens, or some kind of, like, border between the living and the dead. Who knows, right? It becomes very speculative. But there are, like, a lot of theories of what it actually was about. Most of them tend toward the utilitarian side, though. So what the main theory is that the Band of Holes was essentially an outdoor version of the kolka, right? And that these holes were like the grid.
Okay.
So they would fill up one of these 3x3 holes with whatever, peppers or, fruit or whatever. And then, again, that's your tribute. That's your tax. That's how they measure it. There is research, like I said, going on to try to find ancient pollen or plant material that would further substantiate this kind of theory of it. And it's funny, not a lot of that has been done. Like, there have been...
I was going to say...
Yeah, it's funny. There have been a lot of, like, or at least several, expeditions out to this site, right? And it's been known for a while, even in the wider world. But there hasn't been very much, if any, like, real, like, hard archaeological... There's been no digs there at all. There's never been an archaeological dig.
But you said they found Incan pots.
Just on the surface.
Oh, okay.
And people hadn't even really done much of that, because it was these guys, like, less than 5 years ago who found that. And they just, by going there. And one of them didn't even know about it, and they he was a professional archaeologist doing a dig 10 miles away, and he had
What?
never heard of it, been an archaeologist for 30 years. Which is weird, too. It's not like super well known. I had never heard of it before.
Me neither.
I didn't hear about it when I was doing the Nazca Lines research, but it's kind of intriguing.
It's weird.
Yeah, it's
These
kinda
things are
weird.
so weird.
I know, right? So another theory was expounded by a man who surveyed the area in 1953, named Victor Wolfgang von Hagen, or Hagen, whatever, in his book The Royal Road of the Inca. So here's a kind of an extended quote from Mr. von Hagen. Quote, "These circular, stone-lined, although unused graves lay in rows, 7 to 9, and marched up the 50-degree angle to the slope called Mount Sierpe. That is the shaking line of graves reminding the one who named it of a serpent. There are over 5,000 such graves, empty graves insofar as they are circular and stone-lined and of the same construction of those graves which are found with mummies, weavings, and pottery. For years, ever since 1931, they appeared on the photographic plates of the aerial surveys of the Shippy Johnson expedition. They were the strange and mysterious pockmarks. But when discovered and surveyed by the Von Hagen expedition in 1953 and found to be unused graves, the mystery was compounded. The Inca engineers would have seen the same phenomena, but as in the case of the equally mysterious Nazca Lines, they filled in those which interfered with the road and ran it over and through them." Close quote. And I just kind of wanted to unpack that a little bit.
Great.
So he thinks they're graves, but unused graves, which seems very odd. I don't really get this theory necessarily, but
Me neither.
it came up a few times, so I wanted to mention it. Yeah, I guess the idea here is that they were used as graves, but then the bodies were moved at some point for some reason. Or they were meant to be used as graves, but maybe the invading Spanish, meant that never happened. I really am not sure. But that's what some people think. But there are graves which are very near it. So, which I think also undercuts this theory.
Okay.
So, anyway. Another idea is that the pits were used for defensive purposes, that they were a kind of rampart, right, up this hill, creating a defensive position, so essentially you could get into them, and whatever, shoot or see your enemy from further away without being, without them seeing you. I'm not sure.
Did the Incans shoot things?
I believe so, yeah. I believe they probably had melee as well as ranged weapons, although I really have no idea. But they were, like I said, they were a conquering people, so I assume they had fairly sophisticated artillery and stuff for the time, I'd imagine. So anyway, yeah, there are some different ideas, but they all kind of center around the site being used as a utilitarian, kind of thing. Although maybe they had this kind of more ceremonial, ornamental, kind of geoglyph nature, like we were kind of talking about earlier. But I thought it was interesting at the end of his quote, though, I want to say, too, at some point they became unused because, people made roads over them, and, I'm not sure how long ago, but that's the other weird thing, is, it's, long enough and big enough that they were like, oh, we need to, go through this thing, which I think has happened to some of the Nazca Lines, too, actually. So anyway, the site hasn't been very well studied. That's part of the mystery here, too. Or part of why there's, what's creating mystery here is the fact that there haven't been that many, real, hard looks at this.
So it's not like a tourist trap? There aren't, a ton of people hanging out right there?
No, it doesn't seem that way. Although, if you look it up,
Stonehenge or something?
there is, touristy stuff surrounding it. There's, Band of Holes is on Google Maps, and it's got reviews. I don't remember if there were any, but I guess you could write one if you go there.
Terrible, boring.
I know.
Nothing happened.
Right. So there have been several expeditions. There was one by Frederick Angle and Dwight Wallace in the early 70s. But it hasn't been that systematic, right? And there hasn't been any digs. So this caught the attention of two archaeologists, researchers named Charles Stanish and Henry Tantalian, who were not, like I said, even aware of the site, although they were doing research literally 10 miles away. Mm-hmm. And they found out about it through, this is where the aliens come back, they found out about it through one of the many people who sometimes call to ask them about ancient civilizations, Inca civilization, right? And sometimes these people are fans of the History Channel and have watched Ancient Aliens or gone on YouTube and seen shit. And they're like, is this real? Like, what's going on with this? So Stanish and Tantaleon were intrigued, right? Not by the ancient alien stuff. I mean, yeah, it's... Anyway, deserves to be a bit derided, I think. This is kind of stupid. But anyway, not aliens themselves, but anyway. But the site itself, which they quickly found on Google Earth, and, you know, kind of like, oh, what is this? And then they even took their own expedition there and quickly found, again, like I said before, what appeared to be Inca pottery and also some Inca graves. So they also found that the holes are not evenly distributed, but appear to be grouped into what they called blocks, each of which have different patterns of holes. So there's kind of like, you know, a set of holes over here that are kind of arranged a certain way, and then if you go 100 feet down, they're arranged a different way, and they're kind of separated a little bit.
It's all very confusing.
Yeah, it's like, why? What is this, right? So they thought, though, that maybe this arrangement kind of thing was because, okay, this is my family or my dependencies, you know, area to give our taxes. And then this is theirs. So maybe these were built up over time by people, you know, utilitarian again, needing somewhere to measure out their tax
like
or their
big
tribute.
Supermarket.
This is, and it's funny you say that. I read in one of my sources, this is essentially what a market would have been in a market economy society, right? You'd have a market where people would sell things, but instead they didn't live in a market economy. They lived in, you know, this kind of
bartering,
yeah, and just kind of like where the government would just provide everything, right? It was kind of like communistic in a way, socialistic in a way. So yeah, you don't need to sell it. You just bring it here, and then we'll figure out who needs it and get it to everybody. Maybe that's what it was. Again, speculatively. So anyway, they also realized that the Band of Holes is perfectly situated near this site called Tambo Colorado, which is a large administrative center that the Inca would use. And this, to them, made it more likely that this was used as, like we were just talking about, some kind of like, you know, measuring, storing area for these taxes, essentially. And I'll talk about yet another idea of what the Band of Holes could have been, from Jean-Pierre Protzen, a specialist in Inca architecture at the University of California in Berkeley. He has spent years studying Tambo, Colorado, and he doesn't think that the Band of Holes is associated with it. But he thinks that the Band of Holes may have been used to store guano. Now, guano, as we all know, is bat poop, of course.
Yeah, I knew that, sure.
Of course.
Why? Is it valuable or something?
Guano is incredibly valuable. Even to this day, is incredibly valuable because it is extremely useful as a fuel as well as a fertilizer. It's an extremely good both fuel and fertilizer, which a lot of times fuels and fertilizers are similar.
It's time to find a bat cave, I think.
Right. No, well, it's funny. I'm trying to remember if it was in World War I or World War II when America was like basically fighting like a battle over an island so that they could get control of this huge store of bat guano.
No.
Yeah.
There was a war over it?
Well, not the war, but like one battle of a war. But yeah.
Battle over it even.
Yeah. So even into the 20th century, bat guano has, you know.
Oh, today I learned.
I know, right? So, it took me so long to figure out that's what people were saying when they had said TIL. I was too embarrassed to ask anyone, and then I finally figured it out. We all have stuff like that, right? Okay, well, my sources were Wikipedia, the Band of Holes page, Annalee Newitz at Ars Technica, Eric Powell at Archaeology, Ian Harvey at The Vintage News.
Nice.
Yeah, right? So now let's do some weird shit
in the news.
Okay.
I want to go first.
Yeah, you go first.
So mine... Okay, everybody. This is fucking perfect. This is from a local Fox News channel in Crestview, guess where? Florida! So, the authorities there say that a 13-year-old Tennessee boy was charged with stabbing his brother. He told So he was charged with aggravated battery with a deadly weapon. And he's 13, and he stabbed his 15-year-old brother in the arm 3 times with a pocket knife.
Oh.
Yeah, fucked up.
Jesus.
However, sorry.
How is this gonna be funny?
It is funny. I mean, no, it's not funny. Fuck, it's not funny. But wait. So he's being, they sit him down. He's being questioned, and the boy told them, quote, "I'd rather be in jail than 8 hours in the car with him," end quote.
Okay, that is kind of funny. Wow. Also, that kid's a fucking psychopath.
Yeah, what the fuck?
Jesus. Okay, mine are more lighthearted. I have 2 short ones. One, it sounds like it's going to be a Florida story, but it's actually a Chicago story.
Chi-town.
And these are both from the AP Oddities page. And this is from the AP, and it's Chicago police investigators confirm alligator in lagoon. So this is not in Florida. This is on the west side of Chicago.
There's an alligator?
In Humboldt Park. Yes.
No.
Yes. For real, though. Like, there was a lot of buzz about this, I guess, on some social media around Chicago. And enough for the police to be like, yeah, but is there really an alligator in the lagoon in Humboldt Park? Like, really? Really, they confirmed it. There is an alligator in the lagoon in Humboldt Park.
Over there.
We're fairly close. So they've set up a number of alligator, traps. So they
get there?
They don't know. It's a mystery.
Oh.
It's true. Okay, my other one is a little less mysterious, but but definitely funnier. Okay, so it is armored trucks cash rains on Atlanta Interstate.
Oh, my dream. I hear about stuff like this all the time, and I want it to happen to us.
But Dunwoody Police Sergeant Robert Parsons would be quick to say, as he did to a local radio station, that taking money off the road is most certainly a crime. They're investigating to see how much is missing, and Parsons says they're gonna need to get that cash back. So, yeah. Apparently you shouldn't do that.
People do turn it in, though.
They do.
Yeah.
And because these incidents, they happen, like, not that infrequently. In this case, it was an open door, apparently. Somebody left the door open.
Oh, it wasn't like
No.
it fell?
No, that's
That's
usually what it
fucked up.
is.
That's
Usually
fucked
it's
up.
like an accident.
That's actually stealing. I thought it was I was thinking like you're standing there and like $20 bills come raining. You just start picking them
it was
up.
like the truck's right there, and it's literally coming like out of an open door. It's crazy.
I'm sorry,
Those are my
but
weird
no.
shits in the news. Okay.
No, that's not okay. You can't do shit like that.
Right.
As nice as that would be,
Yeah.
the world don't work like that.
Right. No free lunch. Thanks for listening, you guys.
Yes. OMG.
Sticking with
We're
us.
unedited and raw.
I feel like I did stop saying that at some point because it's just like every episode, so it's like whatever.
No, not every episode.
Lightly edited. But this one, yeah.
We're Will Find Podcast.
Yeah, we are. I guess. What did I say the other day? A guerrilla podcast, not like GORILLA, but
Right,
GUE.
right. You had to spell it for me because I was like, huh?
Like, have you ever heard of like guerrilla theater?
Yes.
Like that.
Yes.
Like that idea.
Excuse me, I have a degree.
We
okay?
get shit done.
Thank you.
Whenever it happens.
How dare you question my theater intelligence?
Yeah, we need to be in a show together. That's probably gonna happen soon.
We need to
'Cause if
log
you-
off.
Yeah, we'll probably need to be done. Thanks for listening. I already said that.
Love y'all.
Love you
Follow us on
guys.
Facebook, Twitter,
Mario Text 30, that's my
Instagram.
Twitty.
Hit us up on Patreon.
Yes.
A little bit of extra content there. A little bit of extra content coming up.
We need to do more. Yeah, we've got 2 Patreon subscribers already, so there you go.
Our queens.
I know. Okay, thanks guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.